Welcome all of you. So today we'll start one of the last topics in this course, which is environmental social governance, ESG. So we'll see what is ESG, what's the concept and how did it came into evolution, like how it evolved in India, and what are the mandates related to ESG in India. Also, what are the major components E, S and G, environmental, social and governance. So it sounds pretty similar to SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal pillars, which were society, economy and environment, right. Now, if you look at the ESG, it has environmental, social and governance. So, this part, the governance part and here the economics part, okay, these are somewhat different, but then so far as environmental and social aspects are concerned, both are covered in ESG as well as in the sustainable development goals. So, there would be lot of interdependence or connection between these two principles, as both of them point or emphasize the need for having sustainable development or sustainable practices in the businesses or in the corporate sector. So, ESG, what is it? It is a set of standards that assess a company's performance under three areas, which stands for E, S and G. Those three areas are environmental impact, social responsibilities and the quality of governance practices. So, basically it is a set of standards, or you can say a set of guidelines which tells a company how to manage these three key areas. And if we talk about something like ESG norms or scores, then it can be considered as a set of standards which will assess or evaluate how company is doing with respect to its impact on environment, with respect to its responsibilities towards society, and what kind of governance like the company itself has with respect to its laborers, employees, stakeholders and nearby community. So, because it is getting common in the current decade, it is one of the tools or a metrics which helps investors, businesses and policy makers to understand long term risk and opportunities beyond financial performance. Okay. So, again it is assumed that all the businesses, no matter what, take care about their economics or finance part for sure by default. So, these are the other aspects which may get ignored or which may have some risk associated with them. So, it helps all these people from different diverse sectors to understand long term risk and opportunities beyond the financial performance, and ESG framework can evaluate how sustainable, ethical and responsible an organization or a project is. Again, okay, so it is a generic statement, but which says that it checks whether the project or organization is sustainable, it is ethical and is it responsible in governance, ethical in governance. So, first pillar or the aspect of ESG is E, environmental. You can see here pictures of renewable energy sources like wind, solar PV, then conservation of water, use of electric vehicles, plantation of trees, recycling. Okay. So, all these are the aspects which related to environment, carpooling or the public transport. Environmental aspect evaluates how an organization impacts the natural environment and how well it manages environmental risks and resources. Okay. So, the E part, it is concerning with the effect of organization's activities on the environment, the natural environment, and if there are any activities or impacts, how the organization is managing all those impacts or risk and the resources which it takes from the environment. So, the some of the focus areas can be carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, use of renewable energy, water use, waste management, pollution, biodiversity. So, all these are different components of environment which are related to the activities of businesses. So, these are some of the focus areas, there can be many more. The importance of E in ESG, because it is strong environmental performance for any company, it would reduce operational cost, prevent regulatory penalties and ensure long term resource availability, is not it. So, if the environmental performance is fine, all the compliances are met, all the emission limits are met, it will prevent the regulatory penalties from the government or the pollution boards, other authorities. If it is utilizing the raw materials and utilities properly, if it is recycling, so it will ensure long term resource availability for the company. And if the efficiencies are increased, if the more reliable energy sources are being used, it may reduce operational cost also. So, that is how having good performance in the environmental aspect would help any business. Second one is social. It has to be mainly with the people involved, like mainly the stakeholders who are inside the company, outside the company, including the raw material supply chain community. So, social dimension assesses how a company interacts with people, mainly the employees, customers, suppliers and the communities. These are the four major categories of people where companies often interact with. So, the focus areas can be like some of the focus area can be for the people inside the company, some areas can be for the people outside the company. For inside, it will be employee safety, fair wages, community engagement, customers privacy, human rights, safety, CSR, corporate social responsibility, where I think in India, most of the companies are supposed to give 2% of their profits for CSR activity, right. So, these are some of the focus areas, and the importance, like if any company has a good or a strong social performance, it will, how it will affect the company's performance. It will enhance employees productivity if employees interests are being taken care of, if all the employees are like provided good facilities of healthcare, of pension, of child care for their children, okay, commute, like some company's vehicle for commuting. So, that will enhance employees or company's productivity, build customer trust, community relationships, and it will reduce social and operational risk. The third one, governance. So, it has to deal mainly with the policies and planning strategies of the company and how the decision making process happens in a company and how transparent is it and how ethical are the practices. A governance component focuses on how a company is managed, how decisions are made and how transparent and ethical its practices are, because more transparent and more ethical the practices or the activities in the company are, more will be the acceptability of all the decisions or rules or policies made for different stakeholders of the company. Okay. So, if a company is managed in a transparent way, if following ethical business practices, there would be hardly any dispute, or even if there are any disputes, it will be easy to resolve them because everything is ethical and transparent. So, the focus areas can be the structure of the board, whether it is mixed, diverse, taking people from different backgrounds, transparency, anti-corruption, there is a proper like mechanism to identify the cases of bribery or corruption, and then there are proper mechanism to solve those kind of occurrences. Risk management, shareholder rights, whistleblower protection. Whistleblower protection means if something wrong is happening in any division of the company, and if one of the employees want to take that issue and make it public, so they should be like assured of the protection of their job, that the top management or the company's policies or the company's governance will try to protect that person who is trying to point out something negative about the company also. Importance, the good governance will reduce the corruption, that will ensure that the company is running smoothly, everyone is working promptly. It will strengthen investors' confidence, so that someone who is from outside the company and wish to invest money in that company, and if they know that the governance in that particular company is good, there is hardly any corruption, then they will have good high confidence to invest more and more again, and ensure that the organization operates ethically and responsibly. So, that is a G part of ESG, it is governance. So, that was those were the three aspects of ESG: environmental, social and governance. In India, what is the status of ESG, whether it is mandatory or whether it is not mandatory, and how did it evolve, that we will see later. Let us see whether it is mandatory or not. So, it is partially mandatory based on the literature available or the current status, because some companies they need to report ESG, some companies they do not need to. So, what is the basis of this difference? So, the mandatory ESG framework in India, which is mainly for the big companies, it operates through SEBI's BRSR, that is Business Responsibility and Sustainable Report. So, every company listed in like say top 1000 companies which are listed on Indian Stock Exchange. So, for them based on their market capitalization like factor which is updated every year, SEBI has made a reporting of this business responsibility and sustainability report mandatory for those companies. So, you can say like for top 1000 companies in India it is mandatory, and it is not mandatory for other remaining companies like small private companies, one which are unlisted, the MSMEs, startups, NGOs, or any firm below the top 1000 market cap threshold. They, for them ESG is not mandatory. But then if you look at the investment sector today, a lot of like investors or the banks are concerned about this ESG parameter because of the rule like of the importance it holds in the West, like mainly US and Europe, where based on ESG metric lot of decisions are made on investment and banking loans and all. So, here in India some companies, even it is not mandatory for them to report ESG, some companies they voluntarily disclose ESG data so as to foster or to attract investor trust and meet the demands of global clients. Many companies, even though they are small in market capitalization, they would have golden clients outside India, and for them if a company has ESG report in open, it builds more trust, and also to comply with the requirements of the banks. Some of the banks in India or abroad, they would give the loans or lend the money only to those companies which are disclosing their ESG data or have those ESG metrics to check for. Because the G part, like the governance part of the ESG for a company will give assurance to these clients and banks that the company or a business is properly governed and they are giving money in good hands. Also, when their performance in E and S are also better, they would see that okay, the money is being used in a eco-friendly in a company which is concerned about the environment and which has good relation with the society and fulfills its responsibility towards the society. Okay. So, indirect mandates are also there in India, like there is not like strict like say direct ESG law, but there are many Indian laws which indirectly support ESG principles. For example, all the companies, businesses, they need to be registered with the Companies Act. So, Companies Act of 2013, it mentions about the mandatory CSR spending, that is spending some minimum amount of percentage of profit, annual profit on corporate social responsibility activities, mandatory disclosures on energy conservation, the responsibilities of board towards sustainability and ethics. So, those are the things which are Companies Act, which like indirectly support ESG principles. Then we have a lot of environmental laws related to air, water, waste management, EIA notifications are there, which would take care of the E component of ESG, isn't it? Then we have many labor and social welfare laws, which talks about occupational safety, minimum wage rules, the pay parity, non-discrimination laws, social security for workers, community engagement. So, all these things would be covered under the S and G part to certain extent. So, there are several laws which indirectly support the ESG principles. These laws do not require ESG reporting, but they support ESG related compliance. So, those we can call it as indirect mandates in India. Let us look at how this ESG evolved in India and at what stage it is, because it started from the West mainly in European Union and then US, and then it started becoming more common in the East. So, this table shows the chronological evolution of ESG in India. So, in 2009, even before 2009 there were some initiatives which may contribute towards one or more aspects of the ESG. Let us start from the 2009, where CSR voluntary guidelines were given by Ministry of Corporate Affairs. They introduced voluntary guidelines on CSR, that all the companies must spend 2% of minimum 2% of their profits on the corporate social responsibility activities. And then in 2011, NVGs were formed. What's NVG? The National Voluntary Guidelines. So, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, they introduced NVGs on social, environmental and economic responsibilities of business. Okay. So, here governance is missing, but social and environmental and economic responsibilities are covered. And endorsement of United Nations GPs is UNGPs means United Nations Guiding Principles, and one of the principles here was of respect. Okay. So, but again it is related to the social aspect more than the governance aspect, and it was guiding principles on business and human rights. So, these NVGs were introduced in 2011, and in 2012 SEBI it mandated the business responsibility report, BRR. It introduced in 2012. So, every company they used to give their annual reports at the end of every financial year. There is to generate annual report. So, as a part of annual report they were asked to generate or give business responsibility report also, and this BRR was based on the 9 principles of NVGs. This National Voluntary Guidelines are having 9 principles, and based on those 9 principles business responsibility report was to be prepared by all the companies. And in 2014 the CSR compliance, which was generic by the ministry earlier, it came under the Companies Act 2013, and it was enforced in April 2014. And then in 2015 we had Paris Agreement, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, so SDGs and BRR. So, India adopted that plan agenda for 2030 goals, and now NVGs or the BRR based on NVGs and SDGs, they tried to be like coupled, like combined and integrated report which talks about NVGs and SDGs were utilized. So, let us look at those 9 principles of NVGs, which talks about following ethics, transparency and accountability on all business actions, provide safe sustainable products across their life cycle, ensure employees well-being, safety, respect and support all stakeholders, promote and protect human rights, protect environment, influence public policy responsibly or ethically, support inclusive and equitable economic growth, and engage with customers responsibly and deliver fair value. So, I have tried to classify it under like based on different colors. So, where the environmental aspects are showed in green, social ones are in red, and governance related are in blue. So, these NVGs 9 principle, they are somewhat connected to all 3 domains of ESG in some sense. That is why like BRR was based on NVGs, and when SDGs also came into picture in like after 2015, what happened in 2018, the business responsing reporting, it was extended. Earlier it was like only for top 100 companies, but then it was extended to top 500 listed companies. And then there was a national action plan on BHR, like business and human rights, and BSE, Bombay Stock Exchange, and ESG. So, this ESG terminology started appearing after 2018, and in 2019 combined this business responsibility report, NVG's 9 principles, and with this national action plan and ESG principles coming into picture, the new guidelines, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs released new guidelines called National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct, okay, that is NGRBC, and these guidelines aligns with NVGs, with SDGs, and the respect pillar of United Nations Guiding Principles, okay, and this was introduced in 2021. And this business responsibility and sustainability report, the word sustainability is added now in addition to responsibility. So, it replaced the earlier which was called as BRR, business responsibility report, and now this BRSR, the responsibility and sustainability report, it is based on the national guidelines on responsible business conduct, and it includes ESG metrics also. So, from 2021 onwards, when it was introduced, from 2023 there is something called as BRSR core. It formed the SEBI framework. SEBI proposed the framework on the BRSR core and the value chain in 2023, and since 2023 or sorry 22-23, it was extended from 500 companies to top 1000 companies which are listed in the IPO, like the stock exchange, based on their market capitalization. So, that is how the ESG evolved in India, and now we have many companies which talks about like giving the scores or calculating the scores of ESG, different ranking system and all. We'll see it later. Okay. So to summarize, we started with what is ESG, the three aspects or the pillars, that is environment, social and governance. What do they mean? What are the focus areas? What are the importance or how it is relevant to a company's performance? Then we check that whether it's mandatory in India, how different laws in India they indirectly support ESG, and how ESG evolved over all these years in India. So we'll stop here. Thank you.